Have you ever wanted a podcast that did it all? Sports, politics, world events. Well, you have come to the right place, because you are listening to C&C Talks.
Hello, I'm Colin.
And I'm Charlie.
And welcome to the C&C Talks podcast, Season 2, Episode 5.
Just a reminder, as we do every week, we talk about politics, world events, and sports. And we release every Tuesday, except for this week, because it is currently Tuesday, January 31st, 2023, at about 4 p.m. Pacific time.
I feel like we've been releasing more often on Wednesdays than Tuesdays this year, but don't worry, this episode is late. But to make up for it, we do have a big announcement coming up on this show. We're also going to discuss the murder of Tyre Nichols. More classified documents were found, NFL championship weekend, and a whole lot more. And Charlie, probably the biggest news story of this week was the tragic death of Tyre Nichols in Memphis at the hands of Memphis police. The video being released on Friday, and it was just, I personally did not watch the video, but I read a lot into it. It's just, I don't plan on watching it, but just completely horrifying what happened there.
Yeah, and this is, of course, a trend. This isn't a single isolated incident. This happens far more often than it should, and this is, I think, a rather unique American problem.
I mean, it's a rather unique American problem, yes, but it's like it's always black people, right? And that I mean, there's people this time trying to make the argument, well, this wasn't like because of racism this time because it was a bunch of black officers, but the institution of policing itself is racist. And the other thing, Charlie, that I thought of when I heard about this was on that same day that this video was released. We saw the video of Paul Pelosi being attacked with a hammer. That video came out that same day.
Yes, and that one you have watched.
That one I have watched. And that was obviously a white person beating up someone else. And the police were there, and the white guy was actually doing something wrong. Tyre Nichols was not really doing anything wrong. He was basically obeying the police were saying. And Paul Pelosi's attacker did not get killed, shot. He didn't even get tased. The police were doing basically the bare minimum. And then with Tyre Nichols, they killed him. And it seemed like it was not just them doing, like, it cannot be justified as just policing. Like, this was clearly just murder, and that, like, they were, I don't know if they were trying to murder him, but they were intentionally being extremely cruel to him.
Yeah, and that really is important to emphasize, that we don't know if the intention was to kill him, but the fact was to, of course, deal significant damage to him.
Yeah, and then, I mean, the officers got fired. I mean, thank goodness the officers got fired, and
a sixth one was fired as well recently.
They're going to be inevitably indicted, hopefully convicted, though those cases are always difficult, but that doesn't really get to the heart of the problem, Charlie, right? We've seen, like, Derek Chauvin, he was convicted, sentenced to, 22 years in prison, I believe?
Yes,
at least.
I believe so.
But did that stop these incidents from happening further? No,
well,
so I don't really know what the solution is. I think it's a mix of just a lot of police reform. The police do a lot of things that we should really have someone else do. Do we need police to show up for mental health issues? Do we need people with guns to show up?
They do a lot of good, but there's also some things that need reforming.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the concept of police, at least in my opinion, in theory, is not a bad one. It's just that in practice, it has not worked for most people, or not most people, but a large percentage of this country.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. More classified documents were found, Charlie.
Yes, this time at Mike Pence's house. There was no evidence that Pence actually knew that they were there, and he is cooperating with the investigation. And this is actually a very similar situation to what happened to Biden, but this, interesting, it does raise even more concerns about our country's ability to keep track of documents, considering that they've been found now with Biden, Trump, and with Pence.
Yeah, and I mean, I would not at all be surprised if we found them at more of our officials' homes, and I really hope that there's some searches going on, but that's hardly the point. The point is that these documents are not being kept well track of, and that's a problem because these have, like you said, are top secrets, and I personally am very concerned about where these documents may have ended up, because obviously if they fall into the wrong hands, that's a disaster, right? Mm-hmm. That could seriously put our country's national security at risk.
It indeed could. Ronna McDaniel was reelected as the Republican National Committee chair. She's the chair of the RNC since 2017. But she has, however, overseen 3 very underwhelming election cycles. They lost the House in 2018, the White House and the Senate in 2020, and lost a seat in the Senate and underperformed in the House as well in 2022.
Yeah, it's very confusing to me that they would reelect her. I mean, she's been incredibly loyal to Trump, even going as far as to remove Romney from her name. She's related to Mitt Romney because Romney is an enemy, basically one of Trump's top Republican enemies. But she's been extremely unsuccessful, and the RNC, as far as I can tell, doesn't seem to have a clear vision on how to win elections going forward. And there's a pretty big one coming up in 2024, and that's one that I would say under Ronna McDaniel's leadership, it might not be looking great for them.
Now, to world events now. From the Middle East, Israel has carried out a drone strike on Iran. This caused a massive explosion at a military base. And as you may know, Iran is currently dealing with some massive riots over women's rights that have been going on for months now. And this really has destabilized its government. It may have destabilized their government. And of course, Iran is one of the major contributors to Russia's fight in Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, the entire government of Iran just...
It's really shaken by this.
It's going through some things right now, right? Not just because of this, but like you said about all the women's protesters, all the women's rights protesters right now. One other politics story before we move on, which is that George Santos has officially resigned his committee assignments. As we mentioned a couple weeks ago, Kevin McCarthy assigned Santos to the Small Business Committee and the Science, Space, and Technology Committee in the House. Santos has said at least temporarily he's not going to be serving on these committees until he gets his situation figured out, whatever that may be. I would not at all be surprised, Charlie, if he ends up resigning from the House.
We shall see.
But, I mean, it also comes with even more stuff being revealed about him in the last week, specifically regarding some campaign finance things where he just did not at all properly report donations, including attributing money to people that do not exist. And it really makes you wonder where that money came from, and that would also, in my opinion, seem to be in our national security interest to get that information, because you don't want that coming in from a foreign government.
No, you really don't. And here's that big announcement that we were talking about earlier. We will be going live after the Super Bowl in 2 Sundays from now, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific time on February 12th, with our live reaction to the game, and there'll be more details announced as we get closer to that date. You're listening to the C&C Talks podcast. Thank you for listening.
And that'll actually be our second ever live stream and our first since June, so that'll be fun. But now let's talk about the events that led up to the game. The NFL Championship weekend with the Eagles beating the 49ers and the Chiefs beating the Bengals. Let's get your thoughts, Charlie, on both of those games. We'll start with the Eagles and the 49ers.
Yikes, San Francisco's quarterback room is a hospital. Yeah, that's bad. They had to throw concrete arm Purdy out there, which did not work.
He looked to be in some pain, and of course now we know
he's out for 6 months at least.
So what do you think, though, that means for their quarterback competition next year? Because I doubt that Jimmy Garoppolo will be back, but you've got Trey Lance,
who's injured.
You got Brock Purdy. I mean, they should both be healthy by the time training camp starts. We'll see.
Very stupid solution. Get Tom Brady.
I mean, I don't think it's that stupid. I think it's a very real possibility.
But here's the question: do you trust? Let's say Purdy is still a little bit injured. Would you rather play Brady or would you play Trey Lance?
I'd rather play Brady. I mean, it's Tom
Brady. 6
Brady.
months older, still Tom Brady.
Wait, here's the thing, Charlie, in this conception. The Buccaneers were bad this year.
They had Mike Evans.
Yeah, no, Tom Brady was not bad.
Chris Godwin.
Tom Brady played... Okay, and the 49ers have Deebo Samuel and George Kittle.
Yes.
And Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, I'm aware. Tom Brady played bad with the weapons he had. So that means...
He didn't play that badly. The rest of their team sucked, but he did not suck.
I would disagree with that. Yelling at your offensive lineman on the sideline because you didn't get a good pass off is not acceptable.
I mean, sure, yeah, that is fair. That is not a good look at all. But with the Eagles...
they are unstoppable. I don't think anyone can stop them.
You don't think that
they smashed the Giants. They beat whoever the Niners were starting, but
yeah,
that
we'll give a full Super Bowl
and considering
preview next week.
The Chiefs probably got lucky. They really did get lucky against Jacksonville with that Agnew fumble.
Yeah,
and then probably shouldn't have beat the Bengals.
Again, we'll give you a preview of the game next week. But do you think though that the Eagles they still would have won even with Purdy being healthy for the entire game?
Yes, I think they would have.
Okay. There was some bad officiating in that game.
Both games were terribly
both
officiated.
games were terrible, but that first game...
one in particular.
That first game was not as bad as the second game, where the Chiefs beat the Bengals by a last-second field goal.
On the stupidest and worst officiated 44 seconds in NFL history.
Well, really just the worst officiated game in NFL history, and frankly, it's disgraceful that happened in a championship game, and I think, Charlie, it's a very real... possibility, something. We'll get to what actually happened in the game itself in a minute, but I first mentioned that I think it's a very real possibility that the NFL is intentionally rigging games to benefit
I wouldn't go
higher
that
markets.
far. I wouldn't go that far, but I would say we do need to have an investigation into that reffing crew.
Into that reffing crew, sure, but no, I personally think that, I mean, it does generally, when the calls are bad and one-sided, it does tend to always favor the bigger market team.
I'm just going to do a very short play-by-play of the last 44 seconds of the game. Burrow sacked, the Bengals punt, Sky Moore picks it up, there's a absolutely blatant block in the back that isn't called.
There was.
He runs down to the 45, Chiefs snap it, I don't think they go anywhere on first down, snap it again, Mahomes runs out of the pocket, there's a absolutely terrible non-called holding.
No, correct. And then
a very close borderline call that was called against the Bengals. I do think that was the right call.
That was for the late hit. Oh, yeah.
That was the right call.
I think that
but
was
it should have been offset by the holding.
Correct. And
it would
have just been a redo play. So
the Chiefs come out with a 45-yard field goal, right down the middle, game over.
Exactly. And I mean, that wasn't the only bad officiating. We remember that 3rd and 9. That was a disgrace.
On the 5th down.
Yeah, that was a disgrace. I have to say it made me slightly happy to see Eli Apple eventually get that holding call.
It did.
Will he be back for the Bengals
Cancun,
next
Eli.
year? Yeah, see you in Cancun. Will he be back for the Bengals next year?
No, I don't think so.
Will he be back for anyone next year?
Probably Cleveland.
Cleveland
or Las Vegas or no one else.
All the best people, right?
Yep.
All the best people.
And now we have some tennis because Colin likes that for some reason.
Oh, come on. You like Formula 1.
Hey, at least my sport's worldwide popularity is probably higher than yours.
It's actually
pretty
close.
At least people do things in the sport I like.
It's actually pretty close. Anyway, and it was the Australian Open this past couple of weeks. We mentioned it on last week's show. In the men's side, Novak Djokovic won the men's title, his 22nd career major, which ties Rafael Nadal for the most all-time. Also his 10th Australian Open title, which is the most Australian Open titles by any player, and the second most titles by one player at a single slam. Nadal has 14 at the French Open. He defeated Stefanos Tsitsipas 6-3, 7-6, 7-6. And Aryna Sabalenka won the women's title. It's her first major, defeating Elena Rybakina 4-6, 6-3, 6-4. Rybakina, the defending Wimbledon champion. Sabalenka going to move up to number 2 in the world on the women's side. Djokovic going to move up to number 1 in the world on the men's side. On to MLB, the Hall of Fame announcement was this week, and Charlie, we did get someone elected for a change.
We did. Scott Rolen was elected by the BBWAA. He was a third baseman. He played for the Phillies, Cardinals, Blue Jays, and Reds, and was the 1997 Rookie of the Year with 8 Gold Gloves and 7 All-Star selections.
Yeah, and I definitely think it was the right call to induct him. I feel like there were a couple of other players in that class that maybe should have been inducted.
I agree, but I do think they got this one right.
Yeah.
In other news, the Broncos have no draft picks anymore.
Well, at least not like first 2 rounds. They hired Sean Payton as their head coach, former Saints coach and current Fox Sports analyst. Charlie was referencing there. He's still under contract with the Saints, which means that the Broncos had to trade 2 draft picks to the Saints in exchange for Payton. So,
which is a first from this year and a second from next year.
Yeah. At the same time, though, do you think it was worth it for the Broncos to do that? Because
if there's any coach who can save Russell Wilson at the moment, it's Sean Payton.
So does that mean that you think that this was the right decision?
Yes, they've improved from 4th in their division to still 4th in their division with probably 1 more win.
Yeah, I mean, the draft picks that's going to sting, but at the same time, Sean Payton is a really good head coach. D'Amico Ryans was also hired as the Texans head coach. He's the former 49ers defensive coordinator, and the Panthers picked Frank Reich as their new head coach, former Colts head coach who was fired by them in November. How do you like these 2 hirings, Charlie?
I think both of these teams, especially with the Texans, this isn't going to help them very much. They're still going to probably be in the bottom 3 in the league. They're rebuilding.
Even with the new quarterback.
They are unless they draft the top quarterback.
I mean,
which they probably
will.
They're
gonna get Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud.
Actually, because I hadn't thought about that. They actually might. I think they're still not going to be very good. I project them as like a 6-7 win team.
Predict them as a 6-7 win team. Do you think that maybe the Colts will be worse than them?
Yes, the Colts will be worse than them.
Even though there's been a lot of rumors recently that the Colts might trade up to try to get the number 1 pick from the Bears. You don't think that they're going to do that?
I don't think they will, because I don't think the Bears will let them.
You don't think that the Bears will let them?
The Bears absolutely need help.
Yeah, I mean,
the
there's
Colts
a couple of top people.
have the 3rd pick, correct, or 4th?
The Colts are, I believe, the 3rd pick. I'm not positive.
Well, if you're the Colts, what's the one position that the Bears don't need?
Quarterback.
So they can reliably
you're still going to get a top 2 pick.
Yeah, so either going to get Stroud or Young.
Or Young, probably Stroud though. We'll see which direction.
And as for the Panthers, I like
Texans
this hire.
You do.
I like it. I think they're going to win their division. As weird as it sounds.
I mean,
Tom Brady-less Buccaneers are going to be even worse.
I mean, yeah, they're not going to be good at all.
The Saints, I don't see them doing very well, especially because they don't have Sean Payton anymore.
Yeah.
And the Falcons are the Falcons.
Yeah, I'll say 2 things about that division, which, first of all...
They're bad.
First of all, it's wide open. That division, does any team kind of have a shot, but also the winner of that division, I think, will be another sub-500 team.
Probably. It'll probably be like the 8-9 Panthers again.
Yeah.
Why did I say again? They didn't win last year.
Well, yeah, the Buccaneers won it at 8-9 as well. Well, the NBA All-Star starters were revealed. The Western Conference starters were LeBron James, Stephen Curry, Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, and Zion Williamson. Where in the Eastern Conference, it's Giannis Antetokounmpo, Jason Tatum, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and Donovan Mitchell. What are your thoughts on those selections? Do you think that the voters got it right? Mostly the voters were the fans, of course.
I think they did get this right. The only thing I don't like is that the person who gets the most votes is the captain, because they can essentially just seal themselves in as the starter.
Well, but like it's for like drafting the teams.
Well, yes, obviously, but
like that's really the only thing.
I just don't like how it's done. I think they should change it up, but I don't know how they would. But I just don't. I think it's
So do you think that maybe Joel Embiid was he should have been the starter? Do you think maybe?
Yes.
You do, because I mean it's really tough because there's only 3 front court players in the Eastern Conference. So do you think that Giannis, Tatum, and Durant, one of them should have been behind Embiid, and if so, who?
No, that's a difficult one, because I do think he's in the top 3 conversation, especially with these 3. Is Durant still injured?
I'm not sure.
Because if he's still injured, then I would put Embiid in there.
Yeah.
But we need to move on.
It's tight. Candace Parker signed with the Las Vegas Aces, the defending champions. She will join a loaded team consisting of Asia Wilson, Kelsey Plum, and Chelsea Gray. This will make them, Charlie, the overwhelming favorites to repeat in the WNBA.
Yeah, they are a powerhouse at the moment.
There's basically, at least in my view, no one who can contend. Dana Brown has been hired as the GM of the Astros, former VP of scouting for the Braves. And finally, Jazz Chisholm is on the cover of MLB The Show 23. What are your thoughts, Charlie?
I disagree with this. I think it probably either should have been someone from the Astros, considering that they won the championship, someone like Julio Rodriguez, or even Aaron Judge again.
And I think that, right, it wouldn't bother me if, like, it wasn't Julio Rodriguez. Obviously, I was rooting for him.
Because we're Mariners
fans. It bothers me that it's Jazz Chisholm, who's not just the biggest star in the league.
He's not even the biggest star on his team.
He's not the biggest star on his team, and his team lost 100 games this year. And, right, and, it's not just me saying he's not the biggest star. MLB.com just came out with the ranking that said that the biggest star on that team is Sandy Alcantara.
Yeah.
So what are we doing here?
Yep, and contrary to Colin saying the show was over after this, I have one very small thing to say.
All right, go for it.
And Colin, much just as the F1 season's starting again soon.
Oh, great.
We had our first car release today. Haas released their VF23. Be on the lookout for more of those releasing soon. I know Red Bull's releases on Thursday as we prep for preseason testing as we head towards the season start on March 5th.
In Bahrain?
Yep, in Bahrain.
All right. Thank goodness it's still like 4 weeks away at least.
We're waiting.
5 weeks away, I believe. Anyway, thank you everyone for listening. As that concludes our show, make sure that you subscribe. We have new episodes coming out every single Tuesday or sometimes Wednesday. They're available everywhere that you listen to podcasts. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever. Also, make sure to go to our website, cctalks.net. It has everything that you need to know about the show. Also, call us with your questions, 360-389-2630. Again, 360-389-2630. Also, follow us on Twitter, @CC Talks Podcast. We're also starting to search for other social media platforms that we use going forward as well. For our producer Morris, our production designer Zach, and our proof editor Drake, I'm Colin.
And I'm Charlie.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.